Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming back to the Love and Betrayal channel. Today, I have a new and quite interesting story to share with you. The night he didn't come home, but the dog wouldn't sleep. They always say a woman knows when something is wrong, that there's this gut feeling, this intuition that whispers to you before the truth ever comes out. I used to believe that too. But when it actually happened to me, the first to know wasn't my gut. It wasn't my best friend. It wasn't even me. It was Biscuit, our golden retriever. The dog we rescued together, the dog we promised would grow old with us, the dog who it turned out saw through everything before I ever did. It was a Friday evening when it all began. I had just finished setting the table, 2 plates, a bottle of red wine, chicken parmesan, his favorite. At 5:24 p.m., I got a text from Daniel. Emergency meeting at the firm, might be late tonight. Don't wait up, babe. I love you. I read it, sighed a little, and replied with a simple heart emoji. I didn't suspect a thing. Why would I? We'd been married 5 years. He kissed me every morning, held my hand in public, remembered to buy my favorite tea without being asked. Everything seemed off until that night. Biscuit had been acting strange all day, restless, pacing the living room. Every time a car passed outside, his ears would perk up, then flatten with disappointment. He didn't eat much dinner, didn't even touch his squeaky bone toy, the one he usually dragged everywhere. At 9 p.m., I tried to call Daniel, straight to voicemail. I left a message telling him dinner was cold, but I saved him a plate. By 11 to him, I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through our wedding photos for no reason at all, with Biscuit lying by the front door. Not on the couch beside me, not on his usual rug, just there, staring at the door. Waiting. I called him softly, "Come here, boy." He didn't move. By 1 a.m., I was starting to worry. I called again as you said, I said, still no answers. I texted, "Are you okay? Where are you? Please call me." Nothing. Biscuit was still at the door, tail stiff, ears alert. He wouldn't even blink. I got up, walked over, knelt beside him. He growled. Not loudly, just enough for me to stop. Biscuit had never growled at me, not once. It wasn't aggression. It was warning. That was when my chest began to tighten. That was when I realized I wasn't imagining this. Something was wrong, and he knew it. At 3:42 a.m., the door unlocked. Danielle stepped in, reeking of alcohol and perfume that definitely wasn't mine. His shirt was wrinkled, his collar stained, his eyes unfocused. And Biscuit? He lunged. He didn't bite, but he kicked loud, furious, and nonstop, his body shoved protectively in front of me. Daniel stumbled back. Whoa, hey, what the hell is wrong with him? I didn't speak. I was staring at the buttons on his shirt, one was missing, and at the lipstick mark faintly visible near his collarbone. Where were you? I finally asked. The office, he muttered. I told you, work emergency. Biscuit barked again, more aggressive this time. Daniel flinched. I don't know what's gotten into him, he snapped. Maybe he's sick or something. I shook my head. No, I whispered. He's not sick. He's loyal. Something you clearly forgot how to be. He tried to defend himself, some story about a colleague's birthday and drinks going late, but Biscuit wasn't having it. And honestly, neither was I. That night, I slept in the guest room. Biscuit followed me. He curled up against my side like he was trying to shield me from something I hadn't fully seen yet. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind was still trying to rationalize everything, but my heart had already started to detach. The next morning, Daniel left early, claimed he had another meeting. The second he walked out, Biscuit went to the bedroom closet. He nosed the bottom drawer, Daniel's drawer. Something in me clicked. I knelt down, pulled it open, and found a receipt. One night at a hotel downtown. Date 2 nights ago, 2 glasses of wine, 1 room. I sat there on the floor for a long time, staring at it. Biscuit lay beside me, resting his head on my thigh. I didn't cry. I just knew. The next few days, Daniel acted normal. Too normal. He brought flowers, cooked dinner, asked about my day. I played along, because I wasn't ready for confrontation, not yet. But Biscuit, he wouldn't go near him. He'd bark if Daniel came too close to me. He'd leave the room when he entered. He refused to take food from his hand. And I started watching everything. After I left that night, I didn't go to my sister's, didn't book a hotel, didn't drive around aimlessly with dramatic music playing like some movie scene. I drove straight to the only place that had never felt like a lie. My late grandmother's cabin, 2 hours outside the city. It was dusty, the front porch creaked, and the plumbing complained with every twist of a faucet. But the silence, it was healing. And Biscuit, he adjusted like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. He ran in circles in the overgrown backyard, chased squirrels that didn't care, sniffed every corner like he was remarking our new beginning. I sat on the porch that night with a mug of tea in one hand and the truth in the other. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I was empty, not in a defeated way, in a cleansed way, like I had finally made space for something better, even if I didn't know what better looked like yet. I spent the next few days in silence. I didn't answer Daniel's calls, didn't read his texts, but I watched them pile in. I made a mistake. Please come home. Biscuit probably misses me too. At least let me explain. But there was nothing left to explain. Because once the mask falls, no words can unsee the face behind it. Biscuit slept at the foot of my bed every night. But every morning around 6 a.m., he'd wake up and walk to the front door. He'd sit there, stare out the glass, and wait. I thought at first he was confused, that he missed Daniel. But after a week, I realized he wasn't waiting for Daniel. He was guarding, waiting for him to try. Because Biscuit remembered things I hadn't even noticed. It started to click when I found the other leash. It was tangled in the trunk of my car, one we rarely used. Daniel always insisted he'd take Biscuit to the park when I was working late, said it was their bonding time. But the leash, it had glitter on it, pink lipstick smeared near the clip, and attached to the end was a small charm shaped like a heart. Not mine, not Biscuit's, someone else's. That night, I took Biscuit on a walk down the dirt trail behind the cabin. The stars were clear, the wind gentle. He walked ahead, occasionally glancing back to make sure I was still behind him. And when we reached the bend near the river, he stopped, suddenly still. His ears perked, then flattened. He sniffed the air, then turned back and nudged my leg gently, like he was telling me to go back. It scared me a little. I looked around. Dark dark trees, crunching leaves, no movement. Then I heard it, a branch snapping in the distance. Too loud to be an animal. I turned, shit. We walked quickly back to the cabin. And once we were inside, Biscuit sat by the door again, watching, protecting. The next morning, a small bouquet of roses sat at the edge of the porch. No note, just the flowers. I hadn't told Daniel where I went. No one had. But now I knew. He had followed me. I took the flowers, tossed them in the trash. Biscuit didn't stop watch in the woods. Didn't sleep that night, didn't blink. He remembered something I had once ignored. How Daniel's voice raised during arguments when I questioned him. How his footsteps sounded different when he was hitching something. How Biscuit would try to pull me away when Daniel touched my arm a little too tightly. I didn't leave Daniel because of the cheating. I left him because he'd been lying long before that. And Biscuit, he saw every moment I explained away, every warning sign I labeled overthinking, every fake smile I mistook for love. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the things he thought he could hide, but couldn't. Not from the dog and not from me anymore. That night, I opened all of the windows in the cabin. Let the air in, let the past out. I lay on the couch with Biscuit curled beside me, his nose under my palm, and I whispered, "You knew all this time. You knew." He shifted slightly, tail thumping once, and I smiled for the first time in days. I didn't know what would happen next. Would I file for divorce? Would I ever trust someone again? Would I rebuild this version of myself without always looking over my shoulder? I didn't have the answers. But I had one thing Daniel never gave me: truth, and a dog who refused to let me forget it. The next day was calm. Too calm. Birdsong outside the window. The soft clink of Biscuit's collar as he drank from his bowl. The smell of fresh coffee. You'd think I'd feel peace. But I didn't. Not entirely. Because something inside me had shifted, and Biscuit felt it too. He sat by the screen door all morning, ears twitching with every gust of wind. He wasn't barking. He was waiting and watching. By mid-afternoon, I decided to finally check my phone. 29 missed calls, a dozen texts, all from Daniel. Some angry, some pitiful, some filled with "I love you" and "this isn't the end" and "let me explain." But it was the final message that made my fingers freeze. "If you won't come back, then I'm coming to get you. We need to talk. I deserve that." "No, Daniel. What you deserve is the silence you earned." I deleted the message and stood up to close the windows. But something caught Biscuit's attention. His body tensed, his head lifted sharply. And then he went silent. Not a growl, not a whimper, just stillness. And that scared me more than barking ever could. 5 minutes later, I heard it. Tires on gravel, footsteps on wood. Then 3 knocks. Firm, measured, uninvited. I didn't move. Biscuit stood in front of me, tail stiff, ears flat. "Biscuit," I whispered. "It's okay." But he didn't relax. If anything, he stood taller, stronger, like a shield. The door creaked open a little, just enough for me to see the silhouette. Daniel, same tired face, same smug smile, but this time a touch of desperation in his eyes. Maya, he said, voice soft, please, I just want to talk. I didn't answer. Not yet. Biscuit didn't move. Daniel took a step inside. And that's when something strange happened. Biscuit didn't bark. He didn't lunge, didn't growl. He just looked at me. Like, it's your turn now? Like he'd done his part. Now it was time for me to finish it. I stood. My voice didn't shake. What are you doing here? Daniel held up his hands, the universal sign of I come in peace. I didn't know where else to go. You knew exactly where to go, I replied. You followed me. He hesitated. I needed to make things right. Then why do you smell like her perfume again? His eyes widened. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now, with him so close, it was there. Faint, but real. Same brand I'd caught that first night he didn't come home. He was still lying. You said you made a mistake, I said quietly. One mistake, Maya, that's all. Biscuit growled, just once, a short, sharp sound. I raised my hand to calm him. Stop using words you don't understand, I told Daniel. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is locking your keys in the car. What you did, what you're doing, is a pattern. Daniel stepped closer, and Biscuit stepped in front of me again. This time, no growling, just presence. Unmoving, protective, absolute. You've turned him against me, Daniel spat. I let out a laugh. One I didn't recognize. It was dry, cold, free. No, you did that all on your own. He just saw it before I did. Daniel's face fell. You're really going to throw this away? Years together, our home, our life. I tilted my head. Funny how you talk about our life now. Where was that life when you were whispering in someone else's ear? He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. No more to words. I'm done letting you explain things I already know are lies. He stood there for a long time. Then his gaze shifted to Biscuit. You always did love that dog more than me, he muttered. And in that moment, I finally said what I had wanted to for months. Because he always came home, and he never made me feel like love was something I had to earn. I pointed toward the door. Daniel didn't move at first, but Biscuit took a step forward, not to threaten, but to escort. Daniel was backed up. He looked at me one last time, then walked out, and this time he didn't knock again. The door closed. The silence returned. And for the first time, I let my body collapse onto the couch. Biscuit jumped up beside me, resting his head gently on my lap. I ran my fingers through his fur, whispering, You never needed words to tell the truth, huh? He blinked slowly, tail thumping once. Outside, the wood swayed in the wind. Inside, I held a heart that wasn't shattered anymore, maybe cracked, but open, breathing, stronger than it had ever been. And all because the one soul who couldn't speak had never once lied to me. Some goodbyes are loud. Screaming, crying, words thrown like knives, memories ripped apart in one final explosion. But mine was quiet. Because by the time I said goodbye to Daniel, I had already let go long ago. That morning after he left the cabin, I didn't cry. I didn't stare out the window waiting for him to come back. I just sat with Biscuit in silence, drinking lukewarm coffee, breathing like I had forgotten how to. It felt like walking barefoot after years in tight shoes. Uncomfortable at first, then free. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Simple, efficient. I had already moved half my things out of our shared apartment weeks ago. What was left, I didn't want any more. Daniel sent a few more texts. You didn't mean it. We can fix this. I'll get help. And the one that made me laugh bitterly. Don't let the dog ruin our marriage. I didn't reply. Because I finally understood it wasn't Biscuit who ruined anything. It was the truth. And truth, no matter how painful, never ruins. It only reveals. I stayed at the cabin for another week. Planted new flowers by the porch, painted the old fence Biscuit used to jump over when he was a puppy, listened to old music on an even older radio, and every night Biscuit curled up beside me, still safe, present. We were healing together. One evening I opened an old shoebox I'd found buried in the closet. Inside were photos from our early days, me and Daniel on the beach, laughing, holding hands, that fake happiness captured in golden light. I stared at each picture. Not to mourn it, but to acknowledge it. Because pretending it didn't happen wouldn't make me stronger. Owning it would. I burned them one by one in the fire pit out back. Biscuit sat by my side, eyes on the flames. I whispered, more to myself than to him. I'm not burning love. I'm burning the illusion that it was ever real. The next day I did something small, but powerful. I took off my wedding ring, slipped it into a drawer, closed it gently. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like reclaiming space on my hand and in my life. That afternoon, Biscuit and I took a longer trail into the woods, the kind we hadn't walked in years. He was slower now, a little grayer around the muzzle, but still determined. He trotted ahead, tail high, sniffing the path like it belonged to him. And in a way, it did. He had led me here, not just to this trail, but to this moment. At the top of the hill, I sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley. The wind picked up, and with it came a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the fake kind where you pretend things are fine, but the kind where you finally stop pretending at all. I looked down at Biscuit. "Thank you," I said softly. He blinked, then laid his head on my foot. And just like that, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was grateful. Grateful for a dog who stayed when a man walked away. Grateful for every growl that was actually a warning. Grateful for the quiet companionship that said, "You are worthy, even when they treat you like you're not." That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today I said goodbye to the version of me who kept making excuses, the one who mistook crumbs for meals, the one who confused silence with peace. I am no longer her. I'm the woman who walks away, even when she still loves." Especially then, the next morning I woke up early, made tea, packed my bag, and whispered to the cabin, "Thank you for holding me." Biscuit jumped into the car like he knew. It was time, not to return to what we left behind, but to begin again. I drove back to the city. Not to him. To me. To the version of myself I was finally starting to love. The one who didn't ignore red flags just to stay comfortable. The one who trusted her dog when no one else told her the truth. We moved into a small apartment. Sunlight poured in every morning. The windows faced a dog park. Biscuit had his own bed, but still chose to sleep beside mine. And every night, I kissed his head and whispered, "We're home." Daniel's name stopped appearing on my phone. I never blocked him, but he eventually gave up. Because when someone can no longer manipulate you, they lose interest. I didn't need revenge, didn't need closure. I had something better. A goodbye that didn't hurt. Because it set me free. It's strange how quickly a space can begin to feel like home. Not because it's big or expensive or perfect, but because it's yours. Because the silence doesn't hurt anymore. Because the shadows don't whisper someone else's name. Because your dog still sits by the window, but this time it's not out of fear. It's contentment. It's peace. Our new apartment was nothing like the old one. No granite countertops, no double sinks, no photos of a wedding that no longer meant anything. But it had light, and it had warmth, and it had Biscuit lying in the middle of the living room like he owned the place. Which honestly he did. Every morning I woke up to the sound of his tail thumping against the floor. Not barking, not pacing, just a happy rhythm that reminded me we were okay. No more unanswered calls, no more perfume on a stranger's collar, no more pretending I didn't notice. Just the two of us, starting over. I picked up painting again, something I had put down after getting married. Daniel said it was a waste of time back then, said it didn't pay the bills, said I should be more practical. But now I painted until the sun set behind the window, until my fingers ached and my heart felt lighter. Biscuit always laid nearby, ears twitching as I hummed along to soft music. Sometimes I'd look at him and laugh. "You like this color?" I'd ask, showing him a messy canvas. He'd blink slowly, and I'd take that as a yes. One Sunday afternoon, while walking Biscuit in the park, a voice called out, "Golden Retriever?" I turned around and saw a man jogging toward us, a leash in hand. His dog, a scruffy mutt with oversized ears, trotted happily beside him. "Yeah," I replied. "Rescue. His name's Biscuit." The man smiled. "Mine's Buster. He thinks he owns every tree in this park." Biscuit sniffed Buster, tail wagged once. I didn't think much of it until the next Sunday when we saw them again. Then again the week after that. His name was Ryan. A single dad, quiet, gentle, didn't ask questions too soon, didn't overshare. But he always brought Buster, always greeted Biscuit first, always asked, "How's your day been?" like he actually cared about the answer. I wasn't ready for anything, not yet. But Ryan never pushed. He just showed up, like Biscuit. One afternoon, Biscuit hurt his paw on the trail. Nothing serious, just a sharp twig. But he yelped and started limping. I panicked. Ryan had been walking a few steps ahead with Buster. He turned around instantly, ran back, kneeled beside Biscuit before I could even say a word. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered, gently inspecting the paw. "He's okay," he said to me next. "Just a scratch." He pulled out a small first aid kit from his backpack, bandaged Biscuit like he'd done it 100 times. And when he was done, he looked at me and said, "You're doing great, you know. I don't know what you've been through, but I can tell you're healing, and so is he." I didn't respond right away, just nodded, tears prickling behind my eyes. Biscuit licked my hand, and I realized this was the life I never thought I'd have, but one I was finally ready to accept. Ryan and I started texting, then calling, then coffee. Always with the dogs, always sad, it's always battle. Until one day he asked if I'd like to walk without the dogs, just us. I said yes. Not because I was fallen, but because I was ready to stand beside someone who didn't make me feel small. That night, Biscuit jumped on the bed again. He hadn't done that in months. He lay beside me, head on my chest, tail softly wagging in his sleep. And I whispered, "You didn't just save me, you showed me how to live again." The next morning, I opened my journal and wrote, "The life we built without him is the life I always deserved. I just had to lose the wrong love to find the right peace. It didn't happen overnight. The trust, the ease, the the laughter. It came slowly like dawn after a long night. Soft, hesitant, but undeniable. And the funny thing was, it wasn't me who held back the most. It was Biscuit. After everything, he'd become my shadow. Not in a clingy way, but in a guardian angel in fur kind of way. He'd watch every move Ryan made, the way he walked, the way he spoke, the way he stood too close. Biscuit didn't growl, but he didn't wag his tail either. Not at first. Ryan noticed. He never pushed. When we'd sit at the park, Ryan would toss Buster a ball, then glance at Biscuit and say, "No pressure, buddy, I get it. You're just doing your job." And I loved that about him. That he didn't try to win him over with treats or forced affection. He just showed up, again and again, quietly, steadily, like love should. One weekend, Ryan invited us over for dinner. Just me, Biscuit, and Buster. His place was small, clean, full of soft colors and even softer energy. He cooked, I helped. Biscuit sat near the kitchen entrance, watching everything, not judging. Sagging, not relaxed, just observant, until Ryan dropped a slice of grilled chicken. Before he could reach for it, Biscuit as him patted forward and took it gently from the floor. Ryan didn't flinch. He smiled and said, "I guess I passed test one." Later, we sat on the couch, plates cleared, music humming low from the speaker. Buster lay curled by the fireplace. Biscuit sat beside me, his body against mine, his eyes still on Ryan. Ryan didn't move closer, didn't try to hold my hand. He just leaned back and looked at me. "You know, I used to think dogs just liked everyone." I raised an eyebrow. "And now? Now I think the good ones don't waste their loyalty. They give it to the ones who deserve it, and they never give it back once it's broken." I looked at Biscuit, and I whispered, "Yeah, he taught me that too." That night, as we were leaving, Ryan opened the front door. Biscuit walked out first, then paused, turned around, looked at Ryan, and, without any prompting, walked back in and touched his nose to Ryan's hand. One soft gesture, but it meant everything. Ryan looked at me, stunned. I smiled. "He just said you can stay." Things shifted after that. Biscuit no longer sat between us like a wall. He still watched, still protected. But now, when Ryan held my hand, Biscuit didn't move. When Ryan leaned his head on my shoulder during a movie, Biscuit rested his head on Ryan's foot. Little by little, he let someone else in. I think that's when I realized healing doesn't mean you never remember the pain. It means the pain no longer controls what you're willing to feel again. Weeks passed. Ryan started spending more evenings at our place. He'd bring treats for Biscuit and coffee for me, sometimes a new toy for both dogs. He even learned the exact way Biscuit liked his ears scratched, just behind the left one, gentle circles. Biscuit started greeting him at the door, tail wagging, body relaxed. Once I walked into the living room and found them asleep on the rug together. Biscuit's head on Ryan's chest, Ryan's arm wrapped loosely around him. I didn't cry, but something inside me melted. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. Me, Biscuit, Ryan. That weekend, we all went hiking. The sun was golden, the trail peaceful. At the top of the hill, Ryan set up a small picnic. Biscuit and Buster drank from the same bowl, shared the same treats. They didn't need words. Just like me. Just like now. Ryan reached over and took my hand. He didn't say I love you. He didn't have to, because I already knew. And this time, I believed it. Not because he said it, but because Biscuit believed it first. That night before bed, I kissed the top of Biscuit's head. "You did good, buddy. You let love back in." He wagged his tail and thumped once, then curled up by the door. Not guarding, just resting. For the first time in years. I once thought love was measured in grand gestures. Surprise flowers, anniversary dinners, whispered promises in the dark. But now I've learned real love isn't loud. It's in the way someone shows up on your worst days, in the way your dog finally rests instead of guarding, in the way you laugh without fear that it'll be used against you later. 6 months had passed since the night Daniel walked out of that cabin, and I hadn't looked back. Not once. Not because I hated him, but because I finally loved myself enough not to. Ryan had become more than just someone I cared about. He became the man who fixed the squeaky kitchen cabinet without being asked, the one who remembered that I liked my coffee with oat milk and one sugar, the one who always bent down to greet Biscuit first, every single time. And Biscuit? He adored him now. Not in the tail wagging for anyone way, but in the I try to trust you with the person I protect most kind of way. We took the dogs to the lake one weekend. Ryan brought a new ball for Buster. I brought Biscuit's favorite old chew toy, one Daniel always hated because it squeaked too loud. When Biscuit ran into the water chasing it, I laughed louder than I had in years. Ryan turned to me and said, "You glow around him." I looked at Biscuit splashing in the water, then looked back at Ryan. That's because he never let me dim. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the lake shimmered in golden light, we sat together under a blanket. Ryan's arm around my shoulders, Biscuit's head on my lap, Buster curled by Ryan's feet. It wasn't a family by blood, but it felt like home. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask, what if this isn't just healing? What if this is what I was always meant to have? A few days later, Ryan invited us over for dinner again, but this time something was different. There were candles, music playing softly in the background, a photo frame sitting on the table, one of the four of us at the lake. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled nervously. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "about us." My heart raced. Biscuit sat by my side, tail wagging gently, not alert, not suspicious. Yes, calm, like he already approved of whatever was coming. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. But when he opened it, there wasn't a ring. Instead, it was a silver charm shaped like a paw print engraved with the words, "Found, loved, protected." "I know we're not there yet," Ryan said. "Marriage, I mean, but I want you to know. I see you, all of you, and him too." He nodded toward Biscuit. "You're both a package deal, and I wouldn't have it any other way." Tears welled in my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed, but because for once, someone wasn't asking me to choose between love and loyalty. They were offering both. I took the charm in my hand, ran my thumb across the engraving, and whispered, This is the love we all deserved." Biscuit licked Ryan's hand. And that, right there, and was or a yeah. We didn't rush anything. No moving in immediately, no grand announcements, just small steps. Dinner every Friday, morning walks on Sundays, cozy nights watching movies on the couch, 2 dogs, 2 hearts, one growing home. One evening, Ryan fell asleep on the couch, his head tilted awkwardly, his arm draped over Biscuit. I stood in the doorway for a while, just watching. The man who didn't lie, the dog who never gave up on me. And me, the woman who finally believed she was worth all of it. I walked over, covered them both with a blanket, kissed Biscuit on the nose, and whispered, "You did it, buddy. You brought us home." He blinked once in his sleep, then rested his paw on Ryan's hand. ChatGPT said, "Thôi liền can, yêu ơi chúng ta cùng bước vào part 10, chương cuối của series. He cheated on me, but our dog knew first. Nơi mọi nỗi đau được chữa lành, và một món quà cuối cùng được trao lại, đầy yêu thương, ý nghĩa và mãi mãi." Part 8, the final gift he gave me. The seasons changed quietly that year. Summer melted into golden fall. The trees turned amber and burnt orange. The wind got a little cooler, but our home stayed warm. Biscuit was slowing down. His steps weren't as quick. He slept longer in the sun. And sometimes I'd find him staring out the window with a look in his eyes I didn't recognize before. A kind of wisdom, a kind of farewell. We didn't talk about it. Not out loud. But I think Ryan and I both knew Biscuit had given all of his strength to make sure I was safe, loved, and whole again. Now that he could rest. It happened on a Sunday. We had just returned from a walk in the park, slow and gentle. Biscuit didn't chase the ball that day, just walked beside me, one steady paw after another, tail wagging softly. He stopped by the old oak tree he loved, sat down, closed his eyes for a few seconds, and I swear, he smiled. Back home, he didn't eat much, just laid beside my feet while I painted. Ryan was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune while making soup. And me? I was holding a brush but couldn't move it, because something in my chest whispered, "Set thou Betrayal, hold this moment. That night, Sad night, Biscuit curled up in his usual spot beside the bed. But at 3:12 a.m., I woke up suddenly, not from a noise, but from the silence, the kind that feels too full, too final. I turned on the light. He wasn't breathing. He lay so peacefully, like he had just drifted into a dream. His head rested on my slipper, his tail tucked around his body, and a soft smile still there. I sat beside him, my hand on his fur, my heart wide open, and I whispered, "You did it, my love. You brought me home. You kept your promise." Ryan woke up to find me sitting on the floor, cradling Biscuit's body. He didn't say a word, just knelt beside us and wrapped his arms around me. And for the first time in years, I cried without fear, without shame, without needing to be strong, because Biscuit had given me back the freedom to feel. Even in grief, I was still whole. We buried him in the garden behind the cabin, under the oak tree he loved. Ryan carved a small wooden sign, Biscuit Kuss, the one who stayed, saw the truth, and loved without end. I placed his favorite chew toy beside him, a worn-out red squirrel with one ear missing, and whispered, "Run free now, my boy. You don't have to protect me anymore." The days after were hard. Every sound in the house felt off, every walk too quiet, every dinner too still. But grief didn't swallow me, because in the stillness I found gratitude. He had stayed long enough to see me heal, long enough to know I was okay, that I was loved, not for being perfect, but for being me. A week later, Ryan handed me a small envelope. No return address, no markings. Just my name. I opened it. Inside was a photo, one I'd never seen. It was me, asleep on the couch, paint on my shirt, a book on my chest. And Biscuit, sitting beside me, eyes wide open, watching over me. On the back, in Ryan's handwriting, it read, "He watched you love yourself again." I pressed the photo to my chest and cried all over again, because that was his final gift. Not just love, but the mirror that showed me who I truly was. That winter, I started a blog. The Dog Who Saved Me. I wrote about our story, about betrayal, loss, healing, and how a golden retriever taught me more about trust than any human ever had. The blog grew. Thousands read it, and some cried. Some wrote back with their own stories. Some said, "I stayed because of you." But the truth? I only stayed because of him. One spring morning, I stood in the garden, coffee in hand. Birds chirped, the wind danced through the trees, and Buster came running, his usual goofy self chasing a butterfly. Ryan followed behind, smiling, a little breathless. I looked down at the patch of earth where Biscuit lay, and I whispered, "We're okay. We're happy. You can rest easy now." And just then, a soft breeze brushed against my cheek, warm, gentle, like a goodbye that didn't hurt anymore. That night, Ryan surprised me with a small gift, a silver chain, and on it a charm, Biscuit's paw print, engraved with two simple words. Still here. I held it tight. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. I just felt full. Full of memories, of laughter, of unconditional love, the kind only a dog could teach. Now, whenever someone asks how I survived heartbreak, I smile and say, with a dog who growled when I didn't see the danger, who stood between me and a liar, who waited at every door until I walked through it with courage, and who, when the time was right, laid down his heart so mine could finally rest. Biscuit didn't just save me, he led me to the life I never knew I deserved. And that was the final gift he gave me.